Hello and welcome to the Futurebuild podcast, where we explore the ideas, innovations and individuals shaping a more sustainable built environment. I'm Martin Hurn, Event Director of Futurebuild, and today, as part of our Retrofit Mini Series, we are joined by Sara Edmonds. She's an architect, activist, systems thinker and leading voice in the retrofit revolution. From founding Studio Search and helping launch the Architects Climate Action Network to her current role as co-director of the National Retrofit Hub, Sara has been instrumental in shifting the retrofit conversation from policy and pilots to purpose, people and place. In this episode, we'll explore the real potential of community-led retrofit, social value in practice and system innovations, those needed to scale with impact. We'll also dig into how Sara balances her multiple roles and how she sees the retrofit movement evolving across sectors and scales. Sara, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
It's great to be here.
Good. We always start off with really trying to get behind the person, and I'd love to ask you the question about sort of what led you into architecture and the built environment.
Well, we were having a bit of a chat about this before we pressed record, and of all of the questions that you could ask me, this was the one that I was like, oh, really? And I don't know why it brings out that response in me, but maybe if I jump to like maybe why I practiced architecture, but also why it drove me away. Because we were talking a little bit about there are a lot of ex-architects around who are doing other roles in like tangential or adjacent spaces. And we call ourselves recovering architects, I think, as well. And I think architecture, I find it really fascinating because it's simultaneously really, really present and really like obvious and also totally invisible. And I think when those things are there, that allows it to be really, really powerful. So it shapes the way that we interact with the world, like day in, day out. And that is the product of a bunch of different things, depending on what scale of architecture you're operating within. And to me, that just like shows how much power it potentially has. Powerful is the best way to describe it, I suppose, because that's why it's so important to understand what architecture practice is grounded in. Because if architecture practice is grounded in like the accumulation of wealth, then it's powerful to maybe like a dangerous like perspective. But if architecture is bounded and founded in the creation of places to thrive and to support communities, and we're all members of communities, like we're not in like a single community, but you've got your you know, your friends community, you've got your school gates community, you've got your work community, you've got your sports, you've got your whatever, every place that you interact with other people, you've got all these like loops of community. So if architecture is founded in trying to create spaces where those interactions can be positive and generative, then that's great. And I think for me, I've jumped straight to like why architecture pushed me out and not into the like why it drew me in to begin with. But I think for me, I was seeing far too much of that. I was seeing like I felt so helpless seeing the impact of the built environment on our climate. And I was thinking like, this isn't right. Like, how can we be so involved in a damaging, destructive system? We've got to do something more than that. So that's maybe me jumping ahead, but like getting into it, I studied architectural technology in Dublin and I went on to study architecture in Edinburgh, and I could have kept going. I would have PhD to study some more. And I think after 11 years in university, you probably need to get a little bit of life experience before you think you can add to the academic world. You can study for a long time, but then I think having the actual practice in something is important. So you can actually test your theories and all of that. So I actually started working in some smaller practices because it was just before the financial crash in 2008. But then very quickly after that, everything sort of collapsed and I had to really question where I wanted to work and what I was doing. So I ended up working in big practice architecture, which I think a lot of people did in survival mode, going where the work was. And then I worked in big practice architecture for a while. But then I really felt the squeeze of the culture of big practice architecture. Now, this isn't to say that every big practice architecture company is like this, but it is very true that it's quite an extractive culture. It's definitely not aligned if you want to become a parent. That's not really going to happen. You know, we all have to opt out of the European protections over limitations on how many hours you work a week and all this kind of stuff. So it just becomes you're working 50, 60-hour weeks. I don't know, any nursery out there that's going to take your kids from 6 a.m. until 10 at night. You know what I mean? It just wasn't going to work. So I set up practice by myself. And that, again, I recognize my privilege in that, because not everybody wants to do that, or not everybody feels that they can do that. So I did set up my own practice. And that was transformational for me insofar as being able to be a mother and to actually be present for my children, which I also think is something that's erased a lot of the time in the construction industry. It's like you are only there as a cog in the machine to kind of produce. But actually we are, as humans, we are more than that. So that allowed me to do that. But it was in that moment that I felt really kind of aware of how difficult it is to have a voice when you're a sole practitioner or even a small partnership. That's really difficult when you start to see, oh, hang on, some stuff isn't going quite well here for the construction industry, is it? How am I going to change it?
And how did that shape your work at Studio Search, or the work that you took on?
It's interesting because as a small practitioner, the kind of work that's available to you for all sorts of reasons is going to be domestic refurbishments and extensions. And living in London and having sort of faced some of these questions, I was asking myself, what was I really doing? Now, was I just enabling people who already had a fairly, well off life? Was I just increasing the value of their wealth by creating beautiful architecture and extending spaces that they had the privilege to be able to afford? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because the way in which I sort of align myself to that was that I was improving the way in which somebody could maximize their lived experience in their home, right? But there's only so long I could tell myself that before I was really questioning, come on, architecture doesn't exist in isolation. You can't just look at one thing. What's actually happening out there? 20% of our emissions coming from heating our homes, 40% of global emissions coming from the construction industry. There's only so long that I could tell myself, it's okay, I'm helping somebody's kitchen layout function better with their beautiful extended garden. I was just having this real existential crisis. I was and then it's really hard. What do you do as a small practice? Because I still got to pay the insurance. I still got to pay the subscriptions. I still got to pay, whatever else we've got to pay. And also my mortgage. And so what am I going to do? And there was a real moment of I don't know what to do. And I certainly don't think I can do anything on my own. And I found ACAN. So ACAN had just recently formed, and I went along to one of the early open meetings and sort of found a people, a collective of people who were all saying the same thing. Some working in big practice architecture, some sole practitioners, but all going, that's a bit of a mess. What are we going to do? And not long after that, COVID hit. And really ACAN's impact just suddenly exploded. So I probably should pause and explain what ACAN is.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Maybe not.
We've had some members of ACAN, on the podcast, but as people will know who've listened, I'm a massive supporter, and Futurebuild supported them, for a number of years as well. But tell us about ACAN, and especially those early days of ACAN, maybe.
Yeah. So as I said, I went along to one of the early open meetings and was just really struck. I tell you what I was so struck by. The first time I kind of interacted with them was actually at the launch of Architects Declare. So we went along. Steve Tompkins said to us, come along to Hayward Tompkins, one of the founding people in Architects Declare, along with Michael Paulin, and he said, come along to this, we're doing this thing. He was downplaying it, we're doing this thing, you should come along. And I went along to Battersea Arts Centre, and I was like, this is a pretty big thing, all these architects in this room all going, okay, we are declaring a climate emergency, this is wild. And in the afternoon session, they basically gave the mic to a couple of ACAN founders to sort of say who they were and to announce that there was an open meeting and to come along. And Lauren Shevels jumped up on stage And she's in front of however many hundreds of people were in that room, and like openly said, I feel like a total imposter here, but we are ACAN. This is what we're about. If that resonates with you, because I think Architects Declare was there from a practice perspective, talking about like, if your practice can make these declarations, then great. And as a small practitioner, I was able to do that because that was just speaking on behalf of me and my husband business partner. So we were both there and we were both able to make that declaration. But equally, I didn't feel like a big practice with a big impact. So I felt more aligned with ACAN as like collective of individuals who are trying to like, leverage whatever impact that they could have. So I thought, hang on, maybe this is going to be more aligned with like the kind of thing I could do. So we went along to their next meeting, and as they say, the rest is history. I very quickly got involved, became existing buildings group coordinator, and moved into becoming the thematic cross-cutting coordinator, and then to become steering group coordinator, just all the while working out the balance between how much I could put into voluntary work and my business, which is why I mentioned COVID, because during COVID, half my projects went on hold because my clients were me. My clients were all people living at home, working with their young families. And so that was quite, it was sort of a decision that was taken out of my hands. And so, and my husband was classified as a key worker. He was working in the energy industry at the time. So he had to keep working. And so I had more time that I could put in my evenings into ACAN, as I think quite a lot of people did up and down the country, all the people who were furloughed. And there was just so much activity and we got so much done. There were campaigns after campaigns planned. There was an expansion of the working group activity. There was just so much going on. And it was a really momentous time to be involved with ACAN. Everybody was really committed to doing what they could to really make this change. And it really did have such an impact. The campaigns that we led, the reach that we had. I mean, just look at ACAN now. It's still going from strength to strength, still showing up in places, still being that voice of accountability. And there's, fortunately or unfortunately, there's still quite a lot of work to be done in that space. So it was an amazing time. And the impact of being involved in ACAN still shows up in the work that Rachel and I do day to day now with the National Retrofit Hub.
Did you think that sort of architects, and let's call ACAN almost sort of positive activism, and activists go hand in hand? There seems to be a huge amount of architects that wear multiple hats and do multiple roles, but activism is really an important part of that.
It's so interesting, especially now, the use of the language of activism and protest has become in itself really demonized in our day-to-day world now, which is like, on the one hand, very worrying, but on the other hand, a sign of the cages that it's rattling.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really super important. I think this is where this notion of like the Civic Square talk about the 6 shifts of Retrofit Reimagined, and I'm sure we'll cover that off later, but I just want to mention the 6 shift, one shift in particular, from the individual to the collective. I think this is what ACAN kind of embody, and I think it's what allows people to wear kind of multi hats, because you say to yourself, like, I can think of a campaign idea, that's a great idea, but I have no capacity to deliver it, and I have no capacity to do all these things or even to work it all out. But as a like-minded group of people, collectively we can. And actually, if we all take responsibility for little bits of that role, then a greater thing emerges that we weren't able to do on our own. And there's a sort of a support network there as well. And there's a space in which you can feel kind of supported and seen, but also you don't have to do it all by yourself. That means a lot. And it allows people to contribute in ways that sit within the constraints of their own day-to-day life. And I think the other thing I want to mention about the individual to the collective is that I think most human beings want to see good outcomes for other human beings, right? And I think a lot of the time when that doesn't happen, it's because people are afraid or they're scared or they don't feel that they can put their neck on the line or their head above the parapet. But there are many, many ways to be an activist and to be a protester. And that can just be lending your skills where you can And that's also really, really useful. Like there's a role for everybody in that. And I think if people realize that more, and this is what collective groups like this can do, they can allow you to see the potential that you have to play your role, even if you can't be out on the front line doing a thing. There are many things you can do.
So we had Will Arnold on talking about the sort of role of the engineer, and he talked about being the sort of guardian of materials, and that side. What do you see the sort of modern role of the architect?
What I think it should be is as a systems change designer, frankly, like, and I think the best kind of like maybe tangible example I can give is I've spoken to students over the years at different workshops or whatnot. And one of the things that I will say to students, particularly students of architecture, is, build nothing new. And that can sometimes be a bit like, oh, wait, what? but I'm an architect and I've got a blank sheet of paper and I need to build new. And I'm like, and it's a bit of a like, I'm trying to like get a response to say that. But what I mean by that is like, the building doesn't make you an architect. It's your problem solving capacity that makes you an architect, right? And one of the biggest flaws in architecture is the blank sheet of paper. The notion that you can just specify whatever you like and dream up whatever you want, totally devoid of the context that it's within. And actually architecture is totally about context, and it's totally about being creative with the materials and everything else that's around you. So as an extension of a guardian of the materials, as Will I was explaining engineers to be, I think architects have an obligation to essentially look at the materials that already exist, because you can't say you don't know about the amount of energy and extractivism involved in creating all these materials that we think are available to us. And you can't be blind to that. So if you know that and you have the creative potential to put things together, then you just got to use the materials that are already around us. And I'm sure you've spoken to people who are like Duncan Baker Brown and Rotor DC, all these places that are like repurposing existing materials. And it's just another way of looking at things. It's not different. It's not bad. Actually, it's the most creative time to be an architect. And so you've got to challenge the systems that we're working within, because it's kind of easy. It's kind of easy to put stuff together. Loads of architects now are losing their minds. It's not easy. It is easy. It's really easy to just draw some lines on a page and not think about the context. But those lines, every line you draw, think about how many pairs of hands have to touch any piece of the material in order to build the line you've just drawn. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
You went from big practice to sole practitioners.
Yeah.
And then joining an advocacy group.
Yeah.
And you said that sort of the Power Collective, and almost that then took you away from architecture and into a role at Best up in Scotland.
Yeah.
And then your current role as well. Is it worth talking about those two?
Yeah. So I suppose continuing the story, I'd started popping up and talking at places and talking about the work of ACAN at places. And that was the invitation that will have come from Built Environment Smarter Transformation at the first conference I spoke at theirs with. And I was at that conference, and it was really great because they managed to pull together like a big number of people into one single space, so you're talking to a room of 500 people, and that's got quite an energy to it. And I just got really annoyed. I just got really angry. I was like, had a great conversation. I was listening to perspectives of lots of other people. And I remember John Bootland was also on stage with me at the same time from Passive House Trust, and who's now a board member of the National Retrofit Hub, somebody who I've admired a long time. And I can't quite remember everybody else who was on the panel, but there were some questions with a bit of hand wringing going on, right? Because we had talked about the fact that, stuff has to change and these are the ways in which you can change it. And people were saying, oh, that's really great, that people like ACAN, Passive House Trust, that they can make this change. But what are we going to do? How can we do it? And I just got so angry because I was like, oh my God, you could pay people. That's what you could do, people. You could pay people. I'm sitting here on this stage, on my own time, having volunteered for a couple of years. And we're all producing work. Like, think about like the volunteers with Letty. Yeah. How many people now use the Letty retrofit guide, right? If you use these materials, you've got to pay for them because they're being generated out of like, the contributions of individuals
Thousands
collectively
at a time, yeah.
and they're so useful, and we're designing strategies using this information. So like this notion that it's like, yeah, but how are we going to affect any change? It's like, God, just support the people who are making the change. It's not that hard. So I was kind of like, I'm going to have to stop volunteering now, because guess what? COVID's kind of like, we're going back into the work world, and I have to make a real choice. Like, do I pay my mortgage or do I keep volunteering for ACAN? I can tell you, I got to pay my mortgage. I've got got family, and I guess being ranty and annoyed in a very public space can work in your to your benefit sometimes, because on the way back I got a couple of phone calls from people going, so couldn't help but hear that you maybe had a decision to make. Do you want to come and work with us for a bit? So I started working with Best 2 days a week as a role that they created called Head of Citizen Engagement. And I also started working with the Passive House Trust as their social housing associate. And so I put architecture down, and we kept the practice open because I was also doing some consultancy around retrofit. But very quickly I realized I wasn't really practicing architecture anymore in the way that I'd understood it to be. And that maybe that wasn't where I needed to put my energy. And also, I think it's fair to say there's still some trauma there about the way we were treated as architects and young architects, and particularly as female architects or non-binary or people of color in architecture. It's like, it's not great. And I think I just had to walk away. Like I had to totally turn my back on it for a while. I have gone full circle and come back around, and I totally still appreciate the power of architecture to have, as I said, what's it grounded in, and to have that positive impact, and to have that critical thinking, which I also think is really super important right now, critical thinking. So it's really important that those things are still present in architecture. But yeah, so I was working with Best in Scotland. I was still based in London, but I was working remotely with them and coming up a couple of times a year, working with Passive House Trust, which I really loved. And then the National Retrofit Hub was formed. And for anybody who's not aware, it came out of the authorship of the Construction Leadership Council's National Retrofit Strategy. And within that, there's a recommendation for this like hub-like entity to sort of help convene the work that is happening in retrofit, given that we were and are to some degree still in a national policy void when it comes to retrofit. So I saw that job come up, and I was at the launch in the building centre of the National Retrofit Hub as an idea. And there were people saying like, oh, you're gonna go for the job. And I was like, no, over my dead body. There's no way am I going for that job. But Rachel Owens, my co-director, also an ACAN and former architect, we had a chat, and we were like, but we could go for it as a job share. That would be interesting. And so we did. So we put it to the board. We'd love to do this as a job share. We'd love to do it together. And this is why we think that would work. And to our great delight, they accepted that offer. So, yeah.
And what a formidable double act as well.
Yeah.
And how is it working, Rachel? How do you differ, I suppose? What's your complementary skills?
I'm going to have to say this and she's going to kill me. But I sent her this meme a couple of months ago, and it was two little cartoons, and they were showing like the makeup of their brains, and like my brain is a spicy soup and hers is a bento box. And that's why we work. We're very, very different people, but I think we kind of came up together through ACAN in the ways of working, and those ways of working really underpin the way that we work together in the NRH. So that's really, really important. But I trust her implicitly. I like her very much as a person. She's my friend as well. Yeah. We have a relationship founded on trust. And then we're also not pretending that we know everything. So we're very much reliant on the good, like the contributions that our network make. Like our network, the NRH is our network. Yeah. The NRH is not me and Rachel. The NRH is the network. It is hundreds and hundreds, actually thousands of people who are also all committed to retrofit. And we also believe in sort of consensus decision making. And that's not like designed by committee. Consensus is getting the balance right between understanding how to welcome in insight from people, how best to sort of synthesize that, how to communicate with people about the path that you're taking with that information, making sure people can live with it and that we're not missing anything, but not waiting for it to be perfect, and moving the conversation on. And I would say that it's not, it's down to the NRH and it's down to a lot of great activity in the retrofit world, but I'm really proud to say that 2 years on, the conversation has moved on so much. Like when I started work with the NRH, the conversation was still every meeting, every workshop you went to was, what are the barriers to retrofit? What are the barriers to retrofit? And I thought, I won't ask one more. Don't ask what the barriers to retrofit are. I mean, I can tell you because they're like branded in my brain.
But taking a step back quickly, for those people that are listening and have never heard of the National Retrofit Hub, what is it? What's the key mission? What's the scale maybe of the community now?
Yeah. So the National Retrofit Hub is a non-profit collaborative organisation, and those things we always lead with because that's fundamental to our existence. And our mission is really to enable the local delivery, and I would say now local and equitable delivery of retrofit at scale. That I'm saying that word equitable, it's not in our tagline as our mission as such, but it is something that permeates our work. And I think that's a really, really important thing to hold on to. Because we have to be mindful of the context that we're working in, right? In the built environment. Like that's why we're here with this retrofit ambition. And we have a small team, a small but very beautifully created team of amazing brains. And we work together through a range of different ways. So we have our working groups. We have 6 working groups because retrofit is a very complex system question. But it doesn't mean it's not navigable, and it doesn't mean that it's not something that we can like sort of stitch together. And we do that by sort of separating it down into the 6 working groups that also have cross-cutting themes. So we don't try to silo it ourselves. We try and break it down so we can understand what we need to do in each space. So we have groups looking at finance, and one's looking at delivery, one's looking at skills, one's looking at demand. And also we have cross-cutting themes like everything to do with energy performance certificates, EPCs and MEES, minimum energy efficiency standards, but also community retrofit, also procurement. So there's the 6 working groups and 6 cross-cutting themes. We also do research work and other bid work, but again, generally always in partnership with other organizations. We have strategic partnerships and sponsors all involved as well with us, and they form our advisory panel. So we're always at every point working at the collective scale. So and between different moments of that. So we also sit on the expert advisory panel for the Warm Homes Plan with the department, with DESNZ, with Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And we also are actively doing work with communities in place. So it's like it's quite an ecosystem of things, but it's it's wonderful. I love
in
it.
Your community, that collective group, what's the makeup of that? Who are you bringing together?
Yeah, that's a good question. For the first 6 months of our job, I think Rachel and I did nothing but calls, just got to know everybody in retrofit. Because what I should say is we were set up to convene the retrofit industry because there's loads of amazing work happening in retrofit. But everybody who works in retrofit, far and away, are all real passionately driven people. And so they will be doing something because they are driven to try and like address that nutty, sticky problem. But that doesn't give you the headspace to also try and stitch the whole industry together. So there's all this stuff happening, and it wasn't sort of being held together necessarily. So our job was to kind of come and be the glue of all those different parts. And so we just spent like 6 months making friends with everybody. We were just like, what do you do? Tell us about that. How does that connect with this? And the amount of like attempts we made at mapping stuff, and we have Kumu boards and Miro boards galore trying to like make sense of it all. And actually so much of it, that's really what the success of it is actually the relationships that sit underneath all of the work. So we We engage with communities, we engage with the supply chain, we engage with local authorities a lot, we engage with other organizations who are also working in the space strategically. So we engage with policymakers. Probably the group that we're starting to engage even more with now are installers, contractors, that as well, and finance. So it's really like everybody in that space. And I always have a bit of a problem when we say, oh, we speak to everybody in retrofit. It's like, do you though? It's a lot of people. But we try to understand who has influence, and everybody has influence at different levels. It's not like, I'm not talking about somebody top-down magic wanding stuff influence. I'm talking about everybody has a role in that. And arguably, probably the SME sector has one of the biggest influences that really needs a lot of support in retrofit when it comes to it. So yeah, we kind of gather everyone. I just said it now. I said I didn't want to say it.
Something I really wanted to talk to you about, I know it's something you're extremely passionate about, is about the community-led retrofit. Yeah. It's a term that's sort of, it's used a lot. Yeah. You know, it seems to be gaining traction. I suppose it's sort of still a misunderstanding. What does it actually mean? What does it actually look like on the ground? Because I think, again, it's one of those ideas that, you know, when it's explained, absolutely makes sense. But is it actually possible? You know, what are some examples of that? Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to answer this by answering a different question, only because I feel like this is a really tangible example of like how we go about a thing. So back probably over a year ago in working group 1, we started to look at archetypes, and archetypes being, you know, common characteristics of a given building type. Like, how do we characterize that? How do we codify that? And it was a really it ended up being quite a divisive and really emotive topic, like much to our shock, a little bit like EPCs, right? Who knew? Everybody would get worked up about it, but it's not this, it's this. And okay, tell us more. Like, we need to understand what it is. We need to understand all of the definitions of it so that we can get a real sense of what it means to people in different contexts, and then try and codify it within that. So we did that with archetypes, not through wholesale, because I think some people were like, are you telling me that the NRH is going to design every archetype design guide up and down the country? It's like, no, like, we didn't have the resource to do that. But what we could do is collectively working with you, understand what would go into a best practice guide for what should be in your archetype guides when you come to make them, because this is what we've learned from everybody. So that's our kind of role, is more like, hold up, what's best practice here? And how do we communicate that? And also, how do we communicate it in such a way that people know it's iterative, and if we need to change a thing, we can change a thing. So that's really important. So the same thing stands with community-led retrofit. And I guess I've given away the game about what I think about it when I've used the word led in there. So for a while, I've been really active in community retrofit because I also am co-founder of an organization called Home Energy Action Lab in Hackney, where I live. And we're sort of a community advocacy retrofit organization, which is essentially trying to increase literacy around retrofit, and also understanding what it is that, you know, people in your community, what role do we have, and how can we also play a role in improving our collective lived experience wherever we are. So I was sort of aware of what it's like to be active in community retrofit. And it's hard. It's really hard out there in community retrofit. And I think I'm going to explain it as I tell this sort of weaving story. So there's no money. There's no money out there. If you decide, oh, do you know what? It'd be really good if we could put on a couple of local events and talk to people about retrofit. Nobody wants to pay for that. Nobody will support that kind of work. Not really. So then you have to have enough resilience and enough capacity to understand that, and then realize that it's about finding the projects, so that through winning some, and then you have to be able to write a bid, right? So there are all these barriers to being able to actually do a thing collectively around it without having this sort of mapped out for you. And then let's say you are fortunate enough to win a bit of money, then maybe there's a little tiny slither of that can be used for project management of delivering the project. And how is that supposed to sustain? The model for it just doesn't work. And it's very different from community energy in that regard, because historically, and I know it's not so easy either for the community energy groups either, but historically, one of the ways in which community energy groups could sustain themselves was because the business model for solar installations paid for itself. You know, there was the feed-in tariff. Yeah. There were lots of ways, lots of energy around that community energy groups could be sustained, because there was sort of like a ready business model there that could generate that income to sustain the group. And that's really important, but it just doesn't exist for retrofit in the same way. So I kind of was conscious of like how thin that space is, how hard that is to sort of hold all that together. So as an organization, as the NRH, we always had in our kind of objectives the fact that delivery models of retrofit should be supported. All of them should be supported. So whether it's about local authority delivery, or whether it's about like your energy company obligation type deliveries, or a place, whatever it is, all those pathways should be kind of clear and they should be supported, including community-led retrofit initiatives. But we were also conscious of the fact that we don't want to go promising the world to an already stretched collective of groups that we can't deliver on. So we were really cautious about when will we step forward and say, hey, we've got something we'd like to try and offer to community retrofit initiatives. And so happily, we're kind of at that space now. We've got our cross-cutting theme of community retrofit. We have 3 organizations that have come forward to coordinate that. HEAL being one of them, People Powered Retrofit, and the Centre for Sustainable Energy, CSE. Those 3 organizations have said, we will steward that group. And so we also did a bit of work, a bit of research first on what is the definition of community retrofit? What does that mean to people? And so very soon we'll be going public and telling all the community, we asked and you all said this. So we put out a survey a couple of weeks ago to all of our networks saying, we've got our community theme. We think we know what it means, but what does it mean to you? And then we'll sort of say, this is what the shape of this looks like, and this is what the focus of the works will be. So that's a very loose and not very discreet answer to what you asked me. But for me, community-led retrofit is exactly that. It is civic society. It is who you are encountering day to day in the place that you live, whether that place is defined as your street, or your collective of streets, or your estate, or your village, or your borough. And it is an understanding and a willingness of the community leaders there. And those community leaders can be the person who had the privilege and the wherewithal to set up the kind of cooperative, plus some faith leaders, plus just that neighbor on the street who knows everybody's business because they're really interested in it. There's community leaders in lots of different shapes, and it's those people coming together with that wisdom and knowledge of what makes a place tick, speaking to the dominant systems of retrofit delivery and saying, I know you want to give us external wall insulation here, but we all love the way our houses look up front here. And also people don't trust you because you've let them down in the past, but they trust us. So let's work together. Let's tell you, the delivery agents of the kind of grant funded schemes or the eco schemes, let's tell you the shape of this place, and then you meet us where we are, and we will be flexible. We can work with you. And we're saying that is something that needs to be supported because the evidence points to it being needed. This isn't just because, hey, I'm an activist and I like the way it makes me feel and I can sleep at night. Like, that's not this. All of the reports that will come out about why is that retrofit scheme not delivering what it needs to deliver? You know, the word I'm going to say is trust. Every piece of evidence that comes back is, but people don't trust it. And when I say people, it's not just the residents, it's also the supply chain. They don't trust it because, here's another grant, as if this is going to last long. Why would I invest in skilling up my team? Because that's going to be changed next year. So there's all this like layers of trust that actually really need to be built up. And this is one of them. And we're just responding to the evidence that is out there, which is to say, if you want to see increased delivery of retrofit at scale, and you're not going to engage with this part of the problem, then no matter what you scale up, you ain't getting anywhere. It needs to have that meeting of minds between what a place is, the nuance of that, and what's being offered. So that's what we mean by flexibility in delivery. So it's a really fascinating place to work. It's just so interesting. And I think for us, we just want to make sure that we're able to support what we're able to support and be really clear about that so that we're not over-promising anything.
So can you give us some examples of maybe, some of these early-led, community-led retrofit projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the things I'm most excited about, is being able to showcase some of that, to play a role, if we can, in showcasing some of them, because, you talk about innovation. This is innovation. I'm thinking, I'll give you the examples from in the National Retrofit Hub, we have our community cross-cutting team, but we also have a program called Retrofit Connect. And Retrofit Connect is our funded project where we're working with Civic Square in Birmingham, We Can Make in Bristol, and Retrofit Balsall Heath in Birmingham as well. And they're what's known as the street demonstrators. And this is the sort of next iteration for Retrofit Reimagined. If any of your listeners, they might know about Retrofit Reimagined, but we could put in the show notes a link to a short film that explains the whole backstory of this. So we're working with the street demonstrators, and we're, as the NRH, providing a feedback loop into the community of industry that we're trying to start building. Like we were talking earlier on, like everybody wants to do a good thing, and we can talk about social value in a minute, but I think what we're doing is we're providing a feedback loop into industry from these community asset developers and innovators, and trying to help them sort of like speed their way through some of the sticky problems that they maybe don't have the skills for in-house. So those are 3, but we also have 6 street incubators who are joining, and they would be organizations who are kind of coming through at a different scale or a different stage in their journey of this Retrofit Connect journey. So we are working with Home Baked CLT in Liverpool. Again, all these organizations have beautiful stories, all on their websites, really amazing work. And they're working in Anfield in Liverpool, developing a terrace of houses. Is a really reductive way to describe what they're doing. They're doing that and so much more, but it's also East Marsh United in Grimsby, Planet Cheltenham, Raising the Roof in Bridport. I'm going to forget somebody. I am forgetting somebody. I'm forgetting lots of people. But we've got Home Energy Action Lab in London. How many did I mention? There's definitely some more, and somebody's going to be upset with me.
You can put them all
We're going to talk about it
all.
But also there's going to be many moments that we'll publicize over the next 6 months where people can learn more about these. We actually put out a piece with Jazz Tippett from We Can Make. She's their community organizer. We just put out a piece with Jazz last week. So there's going to be a lot more profiling of these organizations. So
these street demonstrators, I imagine, in any community, there's a mixture then of housing, isn't there? Not just by archetype, as you talked about, but also there's going to be social housing, privately owned. How does community-led retrofit work when you've got that? You've got different stakeholders.
Well, it's the $1 million question in retrofit. It's this like cross-tenure approach to things, because, and again, I think this is what I maybe want to talk about here is an imagination. So we are not in an information deficit moment right now. I think what we are in is we haven't fully imagined what's possible. And I don't mean that to sound pithy and, trite at all. I think we're living in somebody's imagined version of reality right now. So it's just what's a better imagined version of that reality. So our grant fund schemes are by their nature very specifically targeted at somebody, at some types, partly because it's who makes the decisions. So who gets to say what happens. And I think this is what's really important about community and civic society-led retrofit, is that you get a picture of like what constitutes a place. Like, we don't have, it's not like we have like, oh, all of these streets, every home in that is socially rented. Every home here is owner. Like it's pepper pot. It's a mix, right? And we can thank the right to buy and all sorts of weird and wonderful political decisions over the years for the kind of situation that we're in with a lack of access to housing. But the way in which this sort of approach can help overcome that is that it's not singularly led only by the communities, I would say. Local authorities are wise to this as well. Local authorities are a real key player in seeing retrofit delivered equitably and efficiently, frankly, because they understand, who and where are the different tenure types. And then they can understand with, as we're seeing more and more of, devolved settlements or blended finance applications of things. If you at a place level can have a bit more freedom over the finance and funding streams that are coming in, then you can make a decision that actually on this street, we're going to allow for lots of different tenures to opt into it. And you get that when you get more representation in the decision making at a kind of a place-based level. So I don't know if that answered your question, actually. I feel like I went off into a whole other place. I'm living in a project in my head as we're talking right now. That's what's happening.
I think it's trying to sort of, you know, in theory makes absolute sense, but it's almost like, what's the practical, challenges really? You know, we talked there about, you know, the different asset types. We've talked about the sort of the different, you know, owners, you know, social versus private. You know, we also talk, you know, we haven't talked about it, but there's, you know, the government is saying, well, we were broken Britain. You know, there's communities. Do they exist in some places? They're very strong in others.
They weren't so underfunded, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely. You know, so there's all of these challenges, and then you think, well, actually, we're going to get, you know, how do we get these people together? Also, you know, especially on the social housing side, it's about resident engagement as well, and you know, because people. It's their homes. You know, we're talking about, you know, the place they live.
I don't know if you're asking this question, but I think this is a useful point to put out there. I think sometimes when we talk about community retrofit, a couple of things happen. Number one, people diminish its value because it's like, oh, the community. Yeah, that's a lovely thing there. It's the knitting club for the over 60s. Like, oh, that's lovely. Yeah, what can we do to help them? Oh, sure, we'll invest in a new kettle for their tea mornings. You know what I mean? It can be infantilized, to quote Imicor, about like how much people give, how much it's valued really, right? And I think that's number one, not fair, and number two, not true. The other thing is community can be seen as troublemakers. So it's like, oh God, like, no, we don't want to do more resident engagement because, you know, Mary down the road, she doesn't have to your ear off and we'll never get anywhere. And like, so they're seen as troublemakers, right? Yeah. And a time drain. And this is important because what's invested in is what is seen as value. And actually the bit around engagement and to support, to sort of back up the difficult place in which some social housing providers find themselves within in terms of resident engagement is there's no budget for it. Yeah. Because it's not valued. And yet it's evidenced as the place that needs support, but then it's not valued. It's a ridiculous feedback loop of like failure to actually see that this is a thing that you have to engage in. And it is more than consultation. So community engagement isn't like, look, do you want a red door or a blue door? Come on, make up your mind. I haven't got all day, right? That's not it. It's much, much more about challenging procurement structures, governance. And these are not new ideas, by the way. We have done this in the past in a range of different ways. John Christopher's is a great one to talk to about different systems of governance that existed in place shaping over the years. And I'm only naming John because I can't quite remember the structure that we were talking about recently, but we can put this in show notes or we can talk about it again. But it's possible. It's very, very possible. But what happens is, you know, years of austerity, loads of underfunding, the arts get cut, community services get cut, and then it's easy to demonize, you know, the broken Britain and the falling down of it. No, if you funded it, if you supported it, if you trusted it, and maybe it's not funded and it's not supported and it's not trusted because of the power that it does actually wield. And I think that's a really interesting thing that, you know, for so long it's just been a site of mistrust. And actually it's a great site of wisdom, of creativity, of imagination, and of actual change. And I think that's what we want to reckon with a little bit more. Yeah. And it's that same shift again from the individual to the collective. We're never going to get anywhere treating a house individually one by one by one. I mean, what's that statistic that we've all been chewing out for 2 years? You'd have to retrofit one house every 35 seconds to get to the 2050 target. We have to stop saying that. Because by saying that, it's as if we're all aiming to do that. You can't do that. No. We can't. The point of saying that is that it means you can't do it. So if you can't do that, then what? Yeah. Because it certainly isn't, well, we can't do it, but we'll try our best. So maybe if we hit like 10% of that target, we'll be all right. No, we won't. So what's the alternative? And what's the alternative where you can create thriving communities where people aren't escaping from their homes because they're too cold, or they're not escaping from their homes because they're too hot, you know, or they're for whatever reason. What does the alternative look like? And it does mean that we do need to expand our thinking a little bit around, well, what is the supporting infrastructure that we need to see to make sure that can happen? And it is investing in those community spaces again, because when it was too hot, where did I go? Down to the library. Why? Because it was air conditioned. It was a bit quiet upstairs, you know?
Walk around the aisles of the supermarket.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be able to survive somewhere in our community. Where our third space is gone, right?
No,
because you can't go anywhere without having money in your pocket.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
I think it leads us quite nice onto, actually, you mentioned before around social value. And I think it'd be nice for you to sort of tell us how you define that in regards to retrofit, but also maybe how that should be embedded into community retrofit from the start. It's a big question.
I mean, how do you define social value? Thanks, Hurn. There are multiple ways it can be defined, right? This is the thing. And we've just completed a piece of work as part of a measuring outcomes and impact evaluation project that we're doing at the moment. We're doing that with Impact on Urban Health and with Trustmark. And what we're trying to do there, and it came out of our State of the Nation review of retrofit that we did in 2024. And one of the sort of findings of that report was, well, there were lots of things that won't surprise people about the scale of delivery required, et cetera, et cetera. But it was also like, we're not really measuring the outcomes. We're not really measuring the impact. We're counting how many houses we put retrofit stuff in, but we're not actually assessing, did that improve your life? Like, are your bills lower? I mean, we think they are because we did this abstract EPC calculation, which supposedly tells us that this might have happened. Do you know what I mean? Like this.
You think we're measuring carbon and not impact on people?
We're modeling it. Are we measuring it? This is the thing that came out about it, right? Like, so, and I get that the issue that's maybe held us back in the past on measurement has also been the amount of time that takes, but we're in a different time space now, right? We had a conversation earlier on about AI and where is its role and what should it be doing? And there's a bunch of other technological, like, evolutionary processes that have happened, whereby we can do things in a different way that does take that individual process out of it. So we don't have that same problem. We can do things quicker, I suppose, in terms of measurement, but we do need to measure more. And currently we're only targeting quite a narrow set of metrics for successful retrofit. So like you said, carbon, right? Fuel poverty alleviation, bill reductions, right? All of those things are really important. It's not to diminish the fact that they're not important. Yes, they are. But, you know, if we realized that our building stock was a big problem with our carbon emissions as a technical industry, and then we went, oh, let's get a solution to that. I've got one, retrofit. And then the technical industry went, right, we've got it. Retrofit, go and sell it to the people. And nobody cares because everyone's like, retro, what now? Carbon? Are you joking? I'm trying to pay my bills. Like, what is that about? And so we're slow to learn that actually we needed to understand the outcomes that good quality retrofit can deliver for people in a place. And when we understand what they are, then you tell that story and you say, oh, right. So I know that you don't want to borrow debt so we can disrupt your home and make it really dusty and dirty, put some insulation in, put everything back on again. It'll look like it did before, but you'll have a massive headache and you'll be in debt. Are you in? It was like, no, that sounds awful. No, thank you. But if you were to say, it will be so comfortable that you'll be able to sleep from the months of July and August, if you live in London or anywhere else in a urban heat island effect location, Birmingham, wherever, and our ever increasing temperatures, your road won't flood because as part of this place-based delivery of retrofit, we put in a load of suds. Oh, and by the way, biodiversity increased, which helped with air purification. Oh, and on top of that, that means that the incidences of asthma have reduced. So you don't have to go to the GP so often. And your mother-in-law with COPD actually doesn't need as much oxygen as she did need before. Do you want to borrow some debt for that? Oh, yeah, I'm in, because you know what I mean? Like, I'm not suggesting that it's all about the one who can borrow debt, but the story is so completely different. And if we're not going to tell that story, which is actually the real possibility, then what is the point of any of this? So in terms of that, like we've just showcased 6 different innovators who were measuring things in different ways, or even just metering energy efficiency. And they're all published on our website. So there's a lot of this is what I'm saying about the innovation that's out there. Stuff is ready to be put into projects now. But what was lacking was really clear leadership and policy on retrofit so that all these innovators have a place to slot in and go. That's what we're trying to encourage more of happening.
We often talk about innovation quite a lot, you know, and it being the tech side. But actually what you're saying there as well is, do we need innovation in governance and innovation?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. I agree that, like, this is what I was saying before as well about not being in an information deficit. And it's the same as the technological. We're not in that. We don't, that area has enough interested keen beings who are actively trying to like push that forward. That's happening. What we're not embracing fully is the fact that innovation isn't just a shiny box of tricks. It's also how you relate to each other. It's how you work with each other. And this circles back to the beginning story, I suppose, and the way in which we learned to work with people when we were in ACAN. And so much of it is about like active listening, and listening not being just waiting to talk. Because I think that's what happens in a lot of meetings. People are just like, as soon as these people have stopped talking, I'll say my piece and I'll go. But it's actually like listening to what people are saying and absorbing that in and giving the space for it and knowing when to like pull back and just like, you know, think about changing direction. And it's really sort of like being flexible and agile in the way you work. And I think that's why people are willing still to commit their time to work with us in the NRH, because like, yeah, I guess we're just happy to learn as we go and also acknowledge the contributions that everybody else has made, because it's not a hero show. You know what I mean? It's really not.
Staying on that theme of, well, I know you don't want to talk about barriers.
But I did bring them up.
You did,
I did bring them up.
I'd like to frame it in a slightly different way, which is sort of, you know, what's the biggest, you know, innovation or system change that's now needed to really scale things in retrofit?
I mean, it's a couple of things, isn't it? Like, I think, well, maybe it's, oh God, I'm going to say it, aren't I? Collaboration, right? But meaningful collaboration. And what does that actually mean?
That C word, so.
I know. It's dreadful. But it means creating space to actually take people's views on board and to legitimize that contribution. So it's not just a photo op, it's a relationship. I know this will give you your one liner that maybe will make this a bit easier than my ramble. To quote, and I say to quote Pippa Palmer, and Pippa probably goes, "Oh Jesus," but it wasn't. I didn't say it. Somebody else said it. But retrofit is relational. It's not technical. We know how to do the technical stuff. What we're less good at is the relationships bit, and respecting them and understanding what they are, and recognizing that there's a lot of them. And that it's okay. And also, this is what I wanted to say earlier, and it's just come back to me. The other, so if retrofit is relational, that's really important. That also doesn't mean that we're all going to go and be happy best friends and living in a commune because we have to work collectively. That is not what it means either. I don't want to see any of you at the end of the day. Like,
do you that's pulling people off that vision?
Yeah. But I think what happens is people feel like stuff is either or, right?
Yeah.
If you start to talk about needing to work collectively and thinking about what are the shared spaces, what are our third spaces, people suddenly start to think like, oh my God, you want us all to live in a commune and whatnot. And it's not that at all. It's like being smart with understanding what you can share and what you don't need to share. And also that you don't have to be friends with everybody. Like, I know I did joke about us going and making friends. We kind of did. But you don't have to like people or get on with people to be able to work on a shared vision or mission together. You have to be able to respect each other. And I think this is where politics falls down, because it just gets into a fisticuffs, handbags at dawn. I mean, I'm making light of that because actually I'm deeply ashamed of the way our politics is moving at the moment. But you don't have to like each other. You have to be able to, and I don't even agree with the concept of conflict resolution. Conflict's not there to be resolved and put away and never to happen again, because that just leads you down that ridiculous notion that conflict can be done away with. It's about transforming it. It's conflict transformation, not conflict resolution. And again, I have to quote other people for their great work in that space. Again, whose names I'll drop in notes for after this. But like Lumos Transformations is one. But to be able to transform the confrontation so that you can move past it and not just, you know, double down on your position because you've got to be right. But actually it's like, okay, so we're not on the same like line here. What are we trying to get to? And how do we transform this conflict into the next phase of where we all need to get to? And then I never need to see you again. I've gone a little bit the opposite way now, and I don't mean that. But you know what I'm saying? I just mean like people, it's not an either or this. It's not an either or. It's a complex ecosystem of things, and complex politicians hate because they think, oh my God, just give me the easy win. But it's okay. It's mad to think that we can't cope with complexity. We can. I mean, how many thoughts? I bet you've, while we've been on this conversation, probably clocked what time you need to pick your daughter up from wherever she's at. Probably did a little bit of that. Must add that to the shopping list thing. You know what's coming for the rest of your week. Like our brains are continually processing complex things. We are okay. We can do hard things. We just need to know how to collaboratively work through them and move forward so that you can get to a point where actually some resolution is happening.
Yeah. We're almost running out of time, and I always love to finish the podcast with a couple of questions, but I'm sort of intrigued now. I want to ask you sort of, you've had so many different roles in advocacy, activism, architecture. How do you describe yourself now? What's your LinkedIn bio?
I don't know what's my LinkedIn bio now. I so little often have the time to look at it, but I did introduce myself on a couple of conference keynotes as a slasher. And I just think it came out of a joke with a good friend of mine years ago where we were just commenting that, everybody's I'm an accountant / DJ or whatever. And it was this thing that was happening in the 2010s, I suppose. And so we just were being quite humorous about that. And then I thought to myself one day, oh my God, I'm a slasher. I'm a mother / architect / activist / whatever / and then I sort of think that's probably what the moment demands of us all, is to recognize that we are more than the job title that we have, and we're actually about a thing. Is a real Irish saying as well, if you're going to be about it, be about it. So if you're going to do this thing, do it. Don't just expect that you can do it through one of your roles. It affects everything. What we're trying to do affects everything. We are trying to transition from a fossil fuel led destructive extractive economy into one that is renewable and regenerative. And that can't just show up in your day to day. It has to hit you hard. So it has to show up everywhere else. And I'm not saying you have to go and join every protest or start knitting your own socks or whatever. I mean, although there's some therapy in that, but it's if you're going to be about it.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to be able to do stuff in different parts of your life. And having the touch conversations. So yeah, I guess I'm still a slasher.
What I think you've done is you've summed up amazingly the positive impact individuals can have on the built environment. And I'd love to finish on sort of just the last question is, it's almost go back to those early uni days when you're starting out, and what's your bit of advice for someone that's on that journey now? They're taking that first step. They want to be an architect. How do we get that next generation of architects, again, as becoming change makers?
I think that change makers already exist, and what we do is we beat it out of them. And I think there's a lot of emphasis put on conforming, whether we realize it or not. So the advice to people who are coming through is, if you feel it, and if you think that if you feel like you need to change it. Don't be invited to change it. Find your people around you and change that. And I just, one anecdote that always comes to mind is, I think I was in fourth year at uni, and I was really just stuck in a project. And I remember one of my fellow studio students, he's like, "Oh, why does everything have to mean something to you?" He was just happy to draw a nice picture of a building. And I was like, "Oh, but what does it mean?" And I was like, because it has to mean something.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing. It's if you feel driven, don't wait to be asked. Create that space yourself. And there are ways of doing that. Now, I know that's easy to say when you've had years of experience and confidence building, but stick to your guns and find your people, because we're in new times. We're on the edge of systems change that's happening. Nobody knows how to do this. Not really. So it's more about like what drives you, and find somebody to like, you know, help you through that. So mentorship is great. So really my call to the people who are coming through is make sure the ones who are pulling you through know they need to do that, because it's on them as much as it's on you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for your time today. We could talk about, I've got, you know, not to give anything away, but I think we'll be seeing a lot more of you on this podcast pretty soon.
Yeah,
so,
I hope so.
Yeah, so stay tuned. And, you know, just a real final one. If people want to get involved, how do they get involved in NRH?
So check the website. You can join a working group. You can join a cross-cutting team. That doesn't take a huge amount of your time. You can just sort of lurk in the background, or you can very actively be involved in the working groups. But just drop us a line, info@, or follow any of the clicks on our join a working group on the website. Drop us a note on social media, anywhere at all. And we're very, very happy to have anybody who wants to come and join us.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.